Thank you all for being here. I'd like to welcome you all on behalf of the Woodson Institute and the McIntyre Department of Music, co-sponsors of this listening roundtable. My name is Njelle Hamilton. I'm an assistant professor here in English and African American African Studies. It's my pleasure and honor to introduce you to this phenomenal roundtable of artists and scholars, all gathered this evening to talk about Sleepwalking 2. The exciting and important mixtape essay by our colleague, A.D. Carson, A.D. the Great. So I'll introduce our panelists, but we'll play the album through. It's about 17, 18 minutes, and then we'll proceed from there. So we have name tags, so you indicate my colleagues, Professor Jack Hamilton, Assistant Professor of American Studies and Media Studies at UVA. He's a cultural historian who studies sound, media, and popular culture. His first book, Just Around Midnight, Rock and Roll, and the Racial Imagination. Groundbreaking work on recentering race in the conversations around rock history. He's won numerous awards and was named by Pop Matters, because that matters, as one of the top 10 conversation-shifting books about music of the past 10 years. Yeah, but it's true. It's actually true. A pop critic for Slate magazine, his writings appeared in The Atlantic, The New Yorker, NPR, and many other venues. He's currently working on a book I'm excited to read about music and technology since the 1960s. Professor Lanice Avery is assistant professor in the Women, Gender, and Sexuality and Psychology departments here at UVA. Her research focuses on Black women's intersectional identities and how the negotiation of dominant gender ideologies and cultural stereotypes are associated with adverse psychological and sexual health outcomes. Her current project seeks to understand the ways in which gender-based psychological and sociocultural factors inform the sexual beliefs, experiences, and health practices of young Black women. And it aims to promote healthy gender and sexual development among socially marginalized and stigmatized groups. She also runs RISE, Research in Intersectionality, Sexuality, and Empowerment Lab here at UVA. Professor Guthrie Ramsey Jr. is a pianist, composer, and the Edmund J. and Louise W. Kahn Term Professor of Music at University of Pennsylvania. He is the author of several books on Black music, including Race Music, Black Cultures from Bebop to Hip Hop, and the Transformation of Black Music, the Rhythms, the Songs, and the Ships of the African Diaspora. As the leader of the band, Dr. Guy's Musicology, he has released 3 recordings and has performed internationally at legendary venues such as the Blue Note in New York. His documentary film, Amazing, The Tests and Triumph of Bud Powell, was a selection of the Black Star Film Festival in 2015. He co-curated the 2010 exhibition, Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thing, How the Apollo Theater Shaped American Entertainment, for the National Museum of African American History and Culture, Smithsonian. He's also the founder and editor of the popular blog musicology.com, and he's now expanding the banner to include a record label, the Music Q department, and a community arts program called Musicology RX. Is that how you say it?
Yes.
Yes, Musicology RX. And last but not least, the first Marcus Truth Fitzgerald, a record producer and recording artist who's appeared on several 80 tracks. Originally a rapper since 2001, Truth has expanded his craft in the era of production. As a founding member of One Shadow, he has produced and recorded 10 rap albums. Wow. One Shadow is known on the streets of Chicago for their rambunctious beats and catchy hooks. Ladies and gentlemen, Truth. This is the next time. Prepare for fire. These opening lines on A.D. Carson's Good Morning, America are a great introduction to and summary of his groundbreaking work as both a hip-hop artist and hip-hop professor. In rap speak, spitting fire. In Twitter speak, flames emoji. James Baldwin speak, the apocalyptic tomorrow when black justice rains down. A.D. speak, all of the above, but also the rhetorical now. The now of the hip-hop track, the tempo of the beat, the present of his words that bring historical knowledge to bear on a searing critique of white supremacy and its many, many legacies. It's fire that burns and destroys, but also fire that enlightens and awakens. On Sleepwalking Volume 1, released September 2017, A.D. the Great cites Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man's meditation on bumping into sleepwalkers and wondering if he should bump them hard enough to wake them. He says, Baldwin says, sometimes it's best not to awaken them. There are few things in this world as dangerous as sleepwalkers. A.D. adds, though, that, quote, I learned in time that it's possible to carry on a fight against them without them realizing it. It's a question of method, of tools, of weapon. Is hip-hop that weapon or method? A recognizable method for those who are awake or woke and invisible, dismissible and missable for those who think it's just gibberish. I'll quote a YouTuber commenting on a dissertation intro video. Apologies for quoting something that doesn't deserve airplay, but it says, you can get a PhD for gibberish and N-word slinging at Clemson University. The soft bigotry of low expectations.
Yay.
Professor A.D. Carson, performer, recording artist, and assistant professor of hip-hop and global South here at UVA, earned his PhD in rhetoric and composition from Clemson University, not in gibberish, in 2010, to much fanfare. And this partly because in lieu of the traditional 200-page dissertation, written document, he submitted a 34-track rap album, Owning My Masters, the rhetoric of rhymes and revolutions that made news and fans around the nation. Upending the academic credential in display, A.D. announced his mastery of the field of rhetoric by centering hip-hop as form, as frame to hold the ideas, experiences, testimonies, and critiques that constitute the content of his rap compositions. He also announced his intention to make hip-hop occupy space and to use it to contest space within the academy, the space for subaltern art forms, the space for black politics and politics. Master's Digital Cover Art announces its erudition in black scholarship. Claudia Rankin's Citizen, Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man, and others stacked so their spines are visible, crammed into a black knapsack and with handwritten notes stuck between their pages. On the one hand, a visual representation of the qualifying exams for the PhD. On the other, the sonic output that emerges from that literary input. But it's also a revisioning of the titular masters. A.D.'s backpack opens itself up to multiple suggestions. Are these black authors the real masters of rhetoric? The masters who inspire the project? The masters whose revolutionary words about the black experience he carries on his shoulders literally or carries forward? Now, A.D.'s arrival in Charlottesville coincided with the now infamous Nazi marches on August 11, 12, 2017, and culminated in the release of Sleepwalking 1. The events that peeled back the facade of post-racial America underscore the urgency of his work as artist and professor. Sleepwalking 2, a mixtape essay, the focus of our listening roundtable this evening, continues A.D.'s interrogation of what it means to be woke in this moment. Like his dissertation album and scores of term projects in between, Sleepwalking 2 continues to upend the boundaries between art and scholarship, art and politics, and presumes high and low cultures. This is made visible in its subtitle that raises a question of where mixtape and rap end and where essay and scholarship begin. As the opening track attests, words matter. They take on form like sticks and stones that cause harm, no less violent, no less painful for their ephemerality. What's most powerful about 80s work is that wordsmiths like him and other artists before him take up words, making them matter, material, not only as weapons, but as shields, wings, and seeds of alternate futures. Ladies and gentlemen, Avery.
Now that we see the broken bodies and bones, the bruises of the battered, not from sticks and stones, but from the results of what we've long been taught could never hurt us, I wonder if we can stand by our assertion that words don't matter as much as they've always told us. So I wear all these, and those words on my back, hoping to fashion out of the wings that weigh as much as the histories they hold and are held by them. That I can spread them from one end to the other of an empty, infinite scroll and beat them against that vast void, making marks in music, moving me higher and farther, lifting me upward and outward, testing me over and over, letting me know and understand that if we are simply a collection of these and those stories we tell and are told of who we were and are, and can and will be, and what we never will until we build our words against those willed to us, used against us. And though they're heavy as hell, I don't mind wearing them because these wings ain't never been a burden. And the flight is worthy of fear. But the main difference between me and Icarus, his and my wings, is the closer mine taking me to see a sun, the less I worry about drowning or burning, and the more I think about scenes of sons and daughters seeing one another set over seas of centuries. And sure, if their place in the world, as I am that waxing poetic about them here, is a seed that can grow into them, all while they're growing into it, knowing they too are products of not only what we say, but what we do. And rather than become broken bodies and bones, rather than being bruised and battered, they'll be equipped to fight those sticks and those stones, the rhetoric of war, the worst of all the words in the world used as weapons against them, and theirs will be wings fashioned through fire, worn proudly, not a slouch shoulder nor a complaint. And they'll meet one another with the familiar greeting passed down through years. The understood answer being nothing. Because they'll all know that's the only thing that's ever been able to rise above them. Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely nothing.
Come here, man. That's just what they want you to do, man. What the fuck is that?
Grew up around the way, memories of mama evangelizing. My uncles and brothers moving out today. Pop was in town to stay there, called him a Rolling Stone. Made for the coldest homes, a youngin' had to hold his own. Mobile phone ringing on the table. It's a shame see a nigga switch the road, but that came and he was surely able. Less than stable, he gave me a pack of shoulder, slinging the cast of shoulder, gripping the cat and shoulder. Niggas tried that jack move last week, like his chest vacant, tech waving, left the street a nightmare like West Craven. Riding around in my brother trap, lights off me on that other block. Cause niggas shot my mother's spot, deep in thought, I had to tell my brother stop. Flip the trap, do I stay or go? Popped out the whip, shit felt like Trey and Doe. I played the role long enough, but it made me too late. Stuck with a hellish screw face, running to what's my true fate. If you need a little poison in order to make the antidote, then with this hand I hold a standard hope that makes a man that hopes that I am planning with some fan and fire stoke, fingers fire check heat, make him literally sweat the technique. Right with the techniques, temple this
sweetest joy I felt was spitting raps, but never stop people from getting what they got the way they got theirs. Mine ain't the only story that the block tells. Was never shot shells flew, nor was I shell shot. When shots were fired in the house, I ain't wanna tell pops I wasn't a bad team. Violence didn't attract me. I wasn't the shotgun rider. I was in the backseat passenger, past the time, passing the blunt. I bluntly refused, wanted to kick it like I was Chun-Li. We cruised from side to side. The city was my limit. The car was full of smoke while we was in it. If you need a little poison, then water to make the antidote. Then with this antidote, a standard hope that makes a man that hopes that I am landed up to fan and fire story. Make this fire check heat. Make them literally sweat the technique. Right where the techniques temple the street meets curb. Suicide, where it's inevitable, we think you and die. And not just you and I. We think it's only us, but they know better. We think we're doing bad, but they're no better. Ain't no letters coming telling us to keep hope. It's drugs and money on our minds when we hear keynotes. And they're addressed to a public who have no interest in them. So when you think that what you hear is venom, it's really more akin to symptoms of a sickness you are witnessing. A hurt and hope together, a cure that'll let us live again. And you can feel it in your blood and think it's working. You probably feel a sinful, lusted for, thirsty.
Passing of the street lights, I think back to them days. Sitting with mama in that church, and I just happened to pray. I never understood the concept, now I see it clear. Walking on the dark street, I see a car that's coming near. From the rear, I turn back around, continue with my prayer. See the window rolling down, and smoke billows through the air. From the back seat, flashes of lightning, the thunder claps. I look him in his eyes as I fade to black. No coming back, coming back, coming back, coming back, coming back, coming back.
If you need a little poison in order to make the antidote, then with this hand I wrote a standard hope that makes a man that hopes that I am planning notes and fanning fire, stoke the flame, perspire, check heat, make him literally sweat the technique. Right where the techniques temple, the street meets curb. Suicide, where it's inevitable, we think do and die. And not just you and I, we think it's only us, but they know better. We think we're doing bad, but they're no better. They're no better. They're no better. They're no
Everybody's liking it.
And it's always on. And I don't wanna harm, but I got a problem. He said he wanna see me here, and he swears by the amendments he been given. He won't see no prison. He don't see no reason for religion. We don't get no say so in it. We just lay low feelings with it. Ain't no feeling when the cut you suffer from still got this feeling. And ain't nothing concealing it, but how they talk, revealing the hypocrisy of how we often see it and feel it. It's a soundtrack to the death of white supremacy. Whether they ignore it or ignore it, try to limit it, freedom to express it or reject it, keep remembering I'm saying something different than they hear it when they're listening. Here are my grievances, embodied in the God. So it's just my opinion, white supremacy should die. Here are my grievances, embodied in the God. And it is my opinion that nigga should just die. You wanna see me dead, ain't no getting in my head, I'ma get him out my way. And if you wanna kill you, no question what you should do, you should probably do the same. I'm saying that. Push that nigga, stomp that nigga out. Kill that nigga, push that nigga, stomp that nigga out. Kill that nigga, push that nigga, stomp that nigga out. Kill that nigga, push that nigga, stomp that nigga out. You know what I potentially would do to them, and so they need to know mentally to get to me before I do to anybody else. But they did to me, and so that limits the freedom that I get to see. They call the constant problem is my presence where they be at. It's obvious my odd reaction is to how they see that. Believe that it's here now to do them some harm. And we all know how this plays out in their arms. So here's the soundtrack to the death of white supremacy. embodied in the God. So it's just my opinion, white supremacy should die. Here are my grievances, embodied in the God. And it's just my opinion that nigga should just die. You wanna see me dead, ain't no getting in my head, I'ma get him out my way. And if you wanna kill me, no question what you should do, you should probably do this. I'm saying that.
Factory almost kind of like having an outside experience.
It's who I might offend with, especially if they identify with white supremacy. The niggas should be scared, and we should be wary of domestic terrorists who carry pistols get to say, get said, and safety only means that white supremacy perpetuated, and nobody ever gets to say it. So I'm saying this. That weapon's so pervasive, they won't let you say it. When you do, then they'll make their own interpretation. Yeah, sound there to the death of white supremacy. Whether they ignore it or adore it, try to limit it. Freedom to express it or reject it. Keep remembering I'm saying something different than they're hearing when they're listening. Here are my grievances, embodied in the God. So it's just my opinion, white supremacy should die. Here are my grievances, embodied in the God. And it's just my opinion that nigga should just die. You wanna see me dead, ain't no getting in my head, I'ma get him out my way. And if you wanna kill you, no question what you should do, you should probably do the same. I'm saying that.
Training. You can copy that. You can copy that. Downstage, yeah. Okay.
My death won't make front page news. TV shows will not be interrupted to tell you what happened to me or why. And you will go on with your day as if nothing of any consequence had occurred, because I lived and died in Chicago. And since I'm not from Sandy Hook, Boston, any monumental place of gathering, my home is always like a war zone. Because I didn't visit the White House last week, I'm not a pretty little girl with such potential. You won't hear of me or my death. I die daily and never cross your mind. Time has taught me that mine is not the reality you choose to see. My mother's is not the child you wish to save. Designate days and color ribbons to the fallen from important tragedies, while we PTSD our ways to school and church through abandoned playgrounds. Pretend shots and sirens are newsworthy in places where ours will never be the breaking story. We understand your pain. We live it. Our hearts go out to you.
Another community is in this place shocked by devastating violence.
This image woman that have become all to
Another community is in this place shocked by devastating violence.
the suspect that have become all to
Another community is in this place shocked by devastating violence.
the suspect that have become all
Reporting live from well, wherever it is where stuff, well, wherever it is that I am, we're recording live.
I'm asking for my mind back. She cannot get back. No, I don't wanna climax. She cannot sit back and just enjoy the view from where I sit down. Since I don't wanna get up, she cannot get down. I'm asking for my mind back. She cannot something. This is where I'm writing with a root constricting it. Checking dope, I hope you feeling sense. Reality is consistent with this. If you don't get nothing from it, then I miss. The fuck is a hit? I blast my pipe, a tragedy waiting for something to strike. The last is hating, the hunger to fight. And biting my hands is something that's likely capitalized until I demise. And keeping our eyes diverted from that. And hurt by the word of the fact, the words of the act, the purposely purpose to ask. Working the task, earning the words of the class, the purpose to burning the ash. Learning that that's the heat. The people deserving of whatever they have determined, and we should be perfect with that. Turn us and turn us and turn us to cash. Turn us and turn us and turn us to cash. Turn us and turn us and turn us and turn us to cash. You see beneath in the box, and that's what we see. A little box, it's all entertainment. You to watch. Losing a lot, using a lot, using a lot, doing a lot to move you a notch. You know your thoughts are not your own, and you are not smart. I'm asking for my mind back. Can I get that? No, I don't wanna find that. Can I sit back and just enjoy the view from where I sit now? Since I don't wanna get up, can I get down? I'm asking for my mind back. Can I get that? No, I don't wanna find that. Can I sit back and just enjoy the view from where I sit now? Since I don't wanna get up, can I get down?
Hey, Joe. Message they teach, rest of the speech happens me. They got text on the street, on the TV, Sesame. Keep my feelings at bay, damn with bay, Chesapeake. Say I'm here for the state, no one should miss texting me. Said the shooter express it to his friends though. Walking to the movie theater with an expando. Call him psychotic, Melanie, you a terrorist. Trump yelling, make America great from the chest. 4K flats, the data extracts, seamless. On the couch, rubbing my ass, and feeling squeamish. Print track, tune out, you out of the new route. Escape sent, deliver a message like nigga, you out. Shootouts are similar to Wild Western's. West side, purpose and pop shooting pedestrians. And that's when sequestering, needed without a question. Just then, truth on another level. Excellence.
My mind back. Can I get that? No, I don't wanna find that. Can I sit back and just enjoy the view from where I sit now? Since I don't wanna get up, can I get down? I'm asking for my mind back. Can I get that? No, I don't wanna find that. Can I sit back and just enjoy the view from where I sit now? Since I don't wanna get up, can I get down?
Appreciate that verse, man. Yeah. It's a way to close it out.
So how would you like to proceed?
That's a great question. I think we just start up here. So I don't know.
Maybe a statement would be in order.
Statement, yeah, okay. So, yeah, I think that, so I think a few things is that I was very intentional in like wanting to make the album like digestible in one,
That's funny.
well, one sitting. So like that, but like, so I thought that the previous project was 12 tracks and the one before that was 34. Mm-hmm. And I felt in both of those instances, there were lots of things that I never really was able to get to in conversations with folks, even though they felt like they were entire projects. And some of it was that there were a lot of things that I was trying to accomplish with just like one track. And so if I'm talking to folks, then I end up talking about that one thing, and then that takes up all of the time. So if I was to try to like scale back and then to not really change the way that I'm making the individual pieces, but to make the comprehensive piece something that was, at least you had the time to sit through and then have a conversation, then the conversation could be about the entire thing. rather than saying, let's take this one piece and then have, you know, a whole bunch of conversation around that. And then I would feel a little more satisfied with like what could be accomplished in the time. So that has more to do with the desire to like make something that was like less than 20 minutes, more than anything else. It's just to be able to like let it do whatever it needed to do within a space of time. If it's a 50-minute class, we got 30 minutes to talk.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I prefer the short punches, digestible. I mean, that's what's been happening. When our best friend Kanye recently released his 3 new projects, they were short and people were beating up on him for his political stance and all of that. But I still appreciated the fact that they were short, digestible projects, and so that's what I got from this project, and that I can listen to it and actually provide feedback on each and every joint.
Yeah, it also sucks to record 34 tracks and then like you play track 28 and somebody's like, oh, you put new music up. Word. Word. There's deep cuts.
So do you want to go on the line and respond to whatever comes to mind about the project listening?
Sure. Oh.
Okay, I'll start. First of all, congratulations
Thank you.
on just everything. I've read the press, and I've listened to a lot of the work, and it is you are well on your way to create a body of work that I think is going to be very impactful.
Thank you.
Let's start with the length. That's a way to get into it, because I always, as a musician, and I always begin with the sonic, elements, and then move. I could listen to this piece and try to learn it 20 times before I'd even get to what you're actually saying in the piece.
Yeah.
So that's just my orientation into sound organization, because I think when we talk about what this piece is about, is not necessarily contained to the truth claim of the lyrics. Mm-hmm. It's about a lot of things. So I love you talking about the length of the project as something that could be heard and then discussed in a classroom. Mm-hmm. I can't think of anybody in the hip hop world who creates art in that context, which is a good thing.
Yeah,
you know what I
yeah.
mean? So there's a practical side to that.
Yeah.
As a professor, you want to be able to, we have, this is labor, so we have a time frame.
Right.
And if the class is 50 minutes, minute 48, those students are zipping up backpacks, closing their Facebook accounts. And getting ready to break, okay? Yeah. So it's really fascinating to hear it like that. But let's think about it, I have so much to say, cut me off, okay? Okay, so just let's move out further into what this piece is doing for you in the kind of trajectory of a career. Mm-hmm. And just as I think about young professors as yourself, I'm just always sizing you up, because I know if it's black music, more often than not, that tenure case is going to come across my desk.
Right.
And I'll have to make a case, okay, for why this is interfacing with the academy at this time in this place, and what is important. So the usual trajectory for professors, and after reading your press, the thing that they're going nuts over, he made a recording as a dissertation, and that's what the outside world is going bonkers about. But on the inside, we know that DMAs make music to get PhDs all the time. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's not unusual. What is unusual is that the piece itself is not a written score. Mm-hmm. So in the usual world of music studies, what circulates for your tenure case is the score and a recording, not just a recording. Mm-hmm. Because if it's just a recording, there's this idea that it's less rigorous, blah, 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 dot, 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 and just insert that stupid YouTube comment that you read. So that's where that's all coming from, right? This is where they're saying, because there's less cachet in sound organization presented as itself being the raison d'etre for the career. So that's one way that you're really pushing against, the grain here. But let's think about, okay, that's the first comment. Now let's get right into the sound organization, which really is where I think is the straw turning the drink here. I sensed in your work there's this subversion of verse chorus structure. Okay, it's almost as if each piece is through composed lyrically, which announces straight off the bat that this is not trying to be in the market. You're not trying to win a Grammy with this, because it's obliterating all of the rules of good songwriting that Irving Berlin put out in the 1920s. Okay, which still wins Grammys, by the way. Then there is your flow, which is somewhat idiosyncratic, because what I noticed is that its relationship to the beat it's like you're aware of the aura of the beat, but you're not contained to this, kind of isometric declamation to it. So there's this sense of freedom that it almost announces that you are not trying to trance listeners, but you are really calling attention to the lyrics as literature, and not simply as a hook that you want to be an earworm, whereas you could wash dishes and still be hooking. Okay, so that's the other thing. Another thing that I noticed is that there are two kind of vibes that you go for in terms of the tracks. There's definitely a 1990s vibe, which I want to talk to you about, which I hope you can talk to us about in terms of how the beats are organized. But then there's this lo-fi thing that you do in that second to last track, which is really kind of puts it in this is historical conversation going on between those two kind of beat worlds. And then finally, there is this lack of rhythmic couplets in the work, whereas you're not necessarily trying to rhymed couplets is what I mean. There's this lack of rhymed couplets in it that kind of pushes it in a more avant-garde direction than a lot of what we hear in even classic hip hop. The best rappers, rhymed couplets is the name of the game. But you're kind of you withhold that from us. So can we just start there and
Start there.
I told y'all not to go. I didn't want to go first.
Do you want to just kind of take comments and then AD process?
Yeah.
Or if you want to
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
Folks want answers.
before you forget.
Respond. Oh, well, so like the relationship of the beats, there's this, I'm trying to answer without no, that's the thing. That's I'll say that. It's a thing. It's intentional. That's,
Yeah.
And my relationship rhyme-wise to that. But I mean, and Truth could probably talk more about this. How do you, what does it mean to, the expectation and, the payoff for a listener in a verse, and then what that does to trick a listener into listening for the thing that they have been taught to expect.
Yes.
In the writing of rap, we've listened to enough rap to know that, when I say, I'm a really cool cat, if I say I'm gonna hit you with a
baseball bat.
yeah, so folks kind of understand that, and I say, I'm gonna hit you with the, you know, like with the jack of a crowbar and like sort of enjam that and go to another thing. I rhymed. I did the thing, but I didn't do it the way that you expected.
Right.
And so now you're like, that's not what I paid for.
Right.
Yeah, that's not what I showed up for.
Right.
And then when that happens, I think that hopefully an audience is listening, expecting, like, because then like the next time you come and it's like, you know, like today it was a really good day. And then, you know, like tomorrow I'm going to go outside and then like everybody's listening, like, and then you do like, the next thing. I think that's a very, it's an interesting thing to attempt to do, especially if you're trying to tell stories or there is like some other intent behind what might be going on in.
It's rhetorical, in other
Yes.
words. Yes, it's rhetorical, yes.
Yeah, go ahead, Jackie.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, this is great. Also, I think Guy just wrote your tenure letter, so congrats. I fear my observations or questions are not going to be nearly as perceptive. Well, two questions. One of which actually does move off what Guy was bringing up, and like, which is like, I'm really interested in like the relationship between the production and the lyrics and sort of like how, you know, and I'm interested in sort of like the way sort of collaboration functions in terms of the sort of putting the actual tracks together and the selection of the tracks for, because one of the things I was struck by is like, you know, like Kill Whitey has a track that sounds like sort of like a, like it's like it's a club track, you know, like it's got like the trap hi-hats and like, you know, and it's just like, totally, like it's like that's like that sounds like the hit, you know, which is like really interesting. And then the track immediately afterwards that like, as Guy said, has that sort of more lo-fi kind of like backpacky, like it started reminding me of like kind of like, you know, like Mad Lib stuff from the late 90s or and it's beautiful and it's like, and it works so well with sort of what you're talking about lyrically. And then the second question, so that would be my first question, is just sort of like how you go about sort of like, you know, selecting the sort of musical backdrops. And the second one is kind of related, which is sequencing and like how you decided to, because one of the things that's interesting, I think, with a album of this length, that's 5 tracks, it's like, you know, the order of how you're putting those 5 tracks together, you know, on one hand, you've only got 5 tracks, but on the other hand, like the order in which they come becomes like potentially all the more powerful in terms of the structure. So, and especially since, you know, you framed it as sort of like a mixtape / essay, and so sort of like how you decided to sequence the tracks and just sort of in terms of the order.
It's a good sequence,
Yeah, and so I think that it was after, and there were more songs than those that were recorded, and then it was like, so how do we construct a project out of this? And thinking about the essay format, it's like, well, 5 components, then we would have like an introduction and a conclusion, and you know, like then the other stuff make up the body, and then you think about like what Sticks and Stones says and what Escape says, and then like what Antidote, Kill Whitey, and Concern do. And I think that they're doing different kinds of the same work. And that was deliberate after all of the tracks were written to frame them in that way, so that you know, like we were at least making, like, sort of gesturing at like performing an essay. In you know, like in 17 minutes. The like that collaborative process, I knew. So in writing a song like the Kill Whitey, because the song is Kill Whitey, that had to be the thing. I mean, I think that it's absolutely hilarious to think about somebody playing that song at the club, and it's like, you know, like by request. You know, like everybody wants to hear it again. Kill Whitey. And then like it comes on, and then it kind of like it does that thing. And that was intentional, like that if there's a hook that is infectious, and people, if I could get people to say, you know, if you want to see me dead, if you want to see me dead, ain't no getting in my head, I'm gonna get. And so long as I can get somebody to sing that and not care what it's actually saying. And And it really doesn't even matter like what the words are, but like the words here are like, I would love to kill white supremacy. And I don't know, that's a noble cause to get like to make that an earworm is like the death of white supremacy.
It's better than God's plan. God's plan. God's plan. Like,
What about people like wishing on me, you know?
Yeah, right.
wishing on, wishing
Yes,
on.
yes.
Way better than that. Yeah, so that was so it's like deliberate that, you know, like to make the thing that is doing like that's trying to do the heaviest lifting a thing that is also going to be like most accessible.
Most accessible, yeah.
Yeah.
Love that tension, yeah.
And then the others, like concern, I just thought like it made me feel off. You know, like to have that come after like something that is like, I mean, we were talking like the grid, to have something that's like so snapped, like locked to the grid, followed by something that like is merely suggesting that a grid exists, is you know, kind of important to create like this, like it's like you sort of slid off of this thing. It was fun while it lasted. Now like we're in sort of like the like something that is beyond tragedy, and that's like, you know, apathy, I guess. That folks simply don't care what comes on the other side of this violence. So that was kind of what I was thinking about with that. And that is like, I think the difference between Preem and Ryan. And Ryan McGuire did the fourth track, Preem did the second and third. Yeah.
I have a lot of questions,
Word.
which feels like a nice shift given that we've talked so much about like sonic structure. I'm supremely a lyrics girl.
Word.
And I was so excited, and generally I'm so excited because make no mistake, you are a theorist and all of the content is sort of bridging and these little nuggets of theory. So I had a platform for it and was so upset that there was only one lyrical video, because part of what you're doing is you are a wordsmith, a master, without using that terminology, wordsmith. And the way that you play on words is phenomenal and happens throughout. And so I think I had the pleasure of serving on a panel with you and recognized we were drawing from a lot of critical race and what I would call Black feminist theory, and was like, oh, you're my contemporary brother. Like, I'm here for this. So when I came into this project, I was really like, it feels like I just want to go into a corner and just like listen and listen hard. And I had to listen multiple times to get through the like beauty of the sonic landscape and dig into the texture of your prose. So I wanted to ask a couple of questions, and I have organized them by song.
Okay.
So thinking about Sticks and Stones, specifically how you open, which feels a lot like Concern, and I will link those two things together. You're talking about this relationship that you have to teaching the children, so whomever those children are, right, and whatever that looks like. And you make this, you say this line, you say they'll meet one another with the familial greeting that's passed down through years, and they'll all know that the only thing that's never been able to rise above them, like that there's nothing that can ever defeat them. After sort of talking about how we learn to wield our words and use them in ways that sort of up the ante to beat them at their own game. And it made me think of Audre Lorde's Eye to Eye in terms of what do we actually inherit intergenerationally? What are the messages, right, of pain, of oppression, and what can we really learn from being able to think through what these words are? And so I sort of pulled this text, and I'll read just this little short area that's really kind of combing through the whole piece from Sister Outsider. She says, we as Black women are born into a society that's entrenched with loathing and contempt for whatever is Black and female. That we're growing, that we are growing up and metabolizing hatred like daily bread, which means that eventually every human interaction becomes tainted with the negative passion and intensity of its byproducts, which are anger and cruelty. And that this cruelty between us, this harshness, is a piece of the legacy of hate with which we were inoculated from the time that we were born by those who intended it to be an injection of death. But we adapted, learned to take it in, use it unscrutinized. And so my question for you is, have you considered the ways that metabolizing hatred like daily bread and then using it unscrutinized might be the familial greeting that is actually passed down? How do you imagine that our resilience and our imperviousness is actually steeped in intergenerational practices that are not generative or sustaining at all?
Yeah, that's... yeah. That was... no, I think that yes, like so there's this, I mean, I think it's like fairly easy to say like there's a sample from like in the, like, so track 2 and 3, there's a sample of a deleted scene from Boys in the Hood.
Right.
And I think that if you're somebody like who grew up with Boys in the Hood, I remember this situation where I was like after my first year at Clemson in this in the doctoral program, I went to Switzerland, and then I was some folks were like, let's watch a movie, and let's watch a movie that none of us have seen. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, we should watch Boys in the Hood.
You're like, you've never seen it.
You've never seen it. No, and nobody had seen it. So then I put the movie on, and folks were like, this is ridiculous.
Oh.
Like, it was so absurd, the film. It was, I mean, absurd because it was so violent. It's like somebody made this up.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, no. Like, actually,
wow.
Where I'm from. And then, like, folks started looking at me like I was fucked up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not because I got some pleasure from sharing with them what to them was the most absurd, cartoonish, like this absolute violence. Mm-hmm. And folks were like, I can't believe that this is not only can I not believe this is a thing, but you would show this to people for pleasure? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, now I don't want to watch
American.
It. Well, yeah, well, now, and I'm like, well, this is how we get down. Yes. But now I don't want to watch it anymore. I feel called out, and I feel out of place. So, like, to imagine writing again, like those tracks in the middle, to comment on that. How do you use the poison to make the antidote? And like, so there, it was like me taking the deleted scenes from that piece and putting it at the beginning of one that it's just like, it's so easily readable, where these two guys are narrating these circumstances where you're led to believe that one ultimately murders the other. And then the one that comes after it is like this club thing that's going on, and I just pitched it down, and it's the same damn sample that's happening at the beginning of that. But the sample is like where Furious is talking to Doughboy right before all of the stuff happens, and then Furious is grabbing him, and he's like, you need to stop. That's that's exactly what they want you to do. And he's like, who the fuck is they? Mm-hmm. And then he like snatches away from them and then like walks off of the porch. Like, and then we all understand what happens next if we've seen the movie. But that's like deleted from the film. So it's recognizable to folks who know the film. But if you haven't seen the deleted scenes, and it's like, well, where in this movie does this come from? It's like taking a memory that you don't know you have, and then like using that memory to like make you like to like evoke a thing that is like literally not there. If you haven't seen the special edition, you don't have that memory. You know the characters, you know the plot, but you don't know this particular scene. And so like using that to construct this like the part of the body of this, like sort of this argument that's being made. And then concern then like sort of speaks to an aftermath of that.
You're writing my, you're speaking directly to my engagement with the piece, because I feel like I understand that as a possibility, and also it is inherently flawed as a practice. And I think when you were writing Kill Whitey and you're saying, I'm normally peaceful, it made me think about like Toni Morrison in Beloved, when she goes on to talk about how white folks have sort of created this relationship to what they imagine as this demon jungle inside of blackness, but it is truly their own selves, right? And so by your relationship to becoming proximal to that, even in order to kill Whitey, you end up enacting harm. And so it was really interesting to me that you followed that with concern, and you're talking about, you know, and that you wrote it in 2017, which was when the CDC report and the UN statement came out talking about that, like, 53% of murders that black women under 45 are by their intimate partners that are black men. And so, and that's the real gun violence that we're not talking about. And so you're going in to talk about, like, well, what does it mean to utilize without scrutiny that the way to survival is to embrace and embody this violence and wield it harder against white supremacy, but that black women end up being the casualty of that. And so if you come in and at the end you're talking about that you want your mind back, it's like you can't get back to where and at what cost, right? And then are the black women's bodies just the byproduct of your engagement with white supremacy and the battle to restore yourself? And then how might we think about then that as a freedom practice and a strategy? Like, what is the philosophy of freedom if it is about utilizing the poison as the antidote?
Yeah, I think that for sure this, like specifically escape. And like the question is like escaping to where? Right. And my hope at the end, like the reason that like, and I just kind of like, there's this filter at the end that kind of like sort of muffles the entire thing. And then like it sort of just like smothers it out. And for me, that was like very intentional. It's like, yeah, like this thing is unresolved. It is fatally flawed. And yet it's like the imagination like leads you there as the thing that like as the imagination leads you there as the possibility. And like that's also responded to as impossible. Like the thing that you are imagining, like the very idea that like writing the song Kill Whitey like can't really exist in this space, like while employed at this place. You know, like in engaging with colleagues or, you know, like just like folks who are like, but he wrote a song about murdering us.
But if you can't murder Whitey, then are you murdering black women because that's what you can do? Well, and then when is the concern evident in that place? Because I think part of your language is about an us, a ubiquitous us, and the angst that we all sort of have, but there's a gendered relationship to that us.
Yes.
And like, what does it mean? Like, where does that go? What is the concern? What is the breaking? And specifically, how might all of that be oriented toward the message that you're sort of offering up to these children who are captive audiences and sort of listening to that piece? Also, telling you, right? We have so many queer and young folks who are always writing the way out, right? And so while you're talking about this language of like, I'm going to give you this thing, these wings that you will then know, like what are you taking up from what they are telling you when you're revising the strategy of freedom?
Yeah, that's when you get this, we'll bring truth into this conversation.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean, I think I have to sit with that. I don't know. I really, like, I don't know what the, I don't have an answer.
That's fair.
No.
Maybe there is no answer.
No, yeah, I mean, I wish that I did. I know that there's always this, like the desire to attempt to like even thinking about practices that other folks might take up, like even if the content like may not be the path. The content that I provide may not be the path because of the limitations of my experience. And so, you know, like because the way that the practice that creates this album looks different in a classroom You know, like it looks different because the content is actually coming from the folks whose experiences are going to play out in the thing that they make, which is also like an incredibly difficult thing when you are the person who's given the authority to sort of oversee whatever that might look like. I mean, even today, folks are asking, well, what is the content of the thing that we make? What are we allowed to do? And I'm like, that's not even a question that I can answer. Like, do the thing that you are moved to do. And, but then like, I'm having to ask that question of the students when they're like, when they do the thing that they're doing, and then I'm like, but what are the implications of what you do here? You know, like who is harmed by this particular enactment of like these, you know, practices that you are performing? And just asking to consider, you know, what that might look like. And it's a hard space to like to really think around. And by the time that, you know, like we're in a point in a space to like in a space to consider, you know, like it's like the thing that might have been done, like the terrible thing that might have been done is likely like happened. You know, like we're sort of like revising to say like, I didn't mean to do that, or I didn't mean it that way. Or, you know, like I was trying my best, and then we're talking about like intentions, which, you know, like does nothing for the person who's harmed. Is like telling them that you didn't mean to. But yeah, it's heavy.
True. So you're featured on Escape.
Yeah, I'm featured on Escape. So with me, I'm more like a vibe person. You know, I don't look at, I can get the title, I got the verse from AD, and just the drama of the beat, and I pulled some distractions from what he was saying, and I was basically just talking about how, in my mind, we're sort of algorithms, right? We're just a resultant of what we see and what we've been taught, the media and the different things like that. And at this moment on this record, what I felt is that I recognized that I had this certain moment where I'm like, wow, I'm a part of an algorithm. Everything I've been doing has been controlled. And me and my partner, my friend from Eastern Illinois, who I used to rap with, I'm gonna try to figure out where he's at in this algorithm that we've been living in. That's why I had a part on the verse where I'm like, Dylan, you out. Like, you teaching at the University of Virginia, expressing exactly what we used to talk about as kids. Your mind has not been shaped and twisted like mine was at that point. You know, and this is me reaching out to you and saying, hey, I recognize that, man. I want some of that. I want to be a part of that. So that's what Escape was to me.
Yeah, and that the sample, I don't know if anybody recognizes the sample from Escape. Any fans of musicals? No.
Yeah, put it on again. Let's see. Yeah. Anyway, but you
tell. No, yeah, it's from Wicked. It's like who mourns mourns for the wicked. Yeah, so that's also that. Yeah. Anyway, that's just like a small footnote. Thank Preem for that.
Is there a sense, though, kind of maybe pulling some of the comments to refer to the audience questions, that for you, right, he's escaped, but kind of earlier, AD, you mentioned that sort of there are ways that you're constrained, one, by the classroom format and your desire, right, to kind of reach this generation here, right, but also constrained perhaps by being a hip-hop professor, right? Is there a sense of, yes, freedom, right, with kind of the work that you're doing now, but also kind of other newer kind of...
because I don't really see it as, like, so it's like the desire for it, but like also like realizing that like ultimately it's not the thing. Like that it's not really sort of like out, you know, that there is this incredible violence that kind of exists in the space that kind of like that. So I remember writing, like when thinking about how this thing is going to be organized, and someone, like more than one person commented that like this Sticks and Stones is far more optimistic than I am anywhere else in my life, ever. And like normally that's not it. And I'm like, well, the only place that could be, I think it would be dishonest to end the album with Sticks and Stones.
Oh, interesting.
I felt that way. That like to presume that like we're going to like fashion these wings and then like somehow like, no, that's not it. So if you put that there at the beginning and then sort of like work backward, then Escape is like sort of like going back into it. It's not actually getting out of it. It's like, and that's the worry. It's like going to UVA wasn't like, I didn't escape. Like I landed on a plantation.
Listen.
You know, like that's again.
Yes. What
Again.
a metaphor.
Again. So
I have to ask this question because this is like, I mean, I have questions about the role and purpose of art.
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
Because
Optimism possibilities.
it just as someone who writes music and someone who explains music for a living, because the music I make does not feed me, as in most musicians. You know what I mean? It's just like a luxury to be paid for it. So you must be making it for other reasons. When I teach, I'm always making sure that students understand that art is not always meant to be didactic. That art has to somehow be relieved of the burden of truth. No one asked Stephen King about what the role, you know, what good is this doing, or any other. I mean, it's only in music where we collapse lived experience and artistic invention.
Particularly hip hop, I would say.
Particularly hip hop. Yeah, man. And so if we look at your work as theory, you know, which is meant to explain some phenomenon in the world or help us understand patterns of phenomena in the world, and not simply as, because it's the direction we're going, that this is supposed to be solving some kind of world problem, or, you know, rather than a clever use. So when I think about you, I wrote the word cinematic down, that your work has this aura, you know, cinematic. The sound of it reminds me of that. And is that not enough meaning? Could that be enough meaning? You know what I mean? And that I loved your reading of it, and how, you know, to go to Audre Lorde, I really love that, which means that this art can speak to many people in many ways, and there doesn't have to be a way that it has to be in the world. Or, I'm asking you, or is there some specific thing that you are going for when you write, or you know, or is it just the play of language? You're a rhetorician. I don't look at you as I hate that hip hop professor. I hate when people call me the jazz professor. It's like, no, how come my white colleague can be a musicologist?
You know why? You know why?
You know, that was rhetorical as well. You know what I mean? It's sort of like this idea that they're trying to market something that's been here a long time, and I'm getting a little confused.
That's not the hip hop professor. That's not my thing. That's here. I mean, that's the title. That is the thing. So there's that. With the question, I mean, I think that, so to try to address Lanice's questions is like me answering her questions specifically, and not really trying to determine like the album's, like what the album does. It's like I'm answering her question about, you know, like about her reading. So I would hate to sort of put that forward and say, this is what this album is doing, because then that would be dishonest. But it is a response to a question that's generated from a listening, or from several listenings. Yeah, and I think that is kind of the work of the art, is to generate that kind of thing. And part of the purpose of gathering folks from multiple backgrounds to get those kinds of questions that many of us are going to, like, they kind of comes in conflict because of the disciplines that, like, you know, like these, the literatures that we read or the arts that we engage lead us, like bring us to this spot, and then we engage whatever is in front of us, like through that filter. So for me, I think that that's really important, because I'm attempting to do a lot of these different things whenever I'm writing.
Right.
Is that like there's a world of music that that I'm thinking about. There's like the generational thing. There's like a geographical like sonic thing that I'm attempting to go for.
Yeah.
But then there are all these people that I'm reading and that I'm trying to think alongside and doing that kind of work as well. And so
They're not mutually exclusive.
no,
Right?
and so it's like there has to be an ability to at least like respond to the questions. But if somebody says, well, what is the specific work of this album, then like my answer to that would be much different.
Yes.
But because this is a question, I can answer that question because like if it's like, well, that was nowhere on my radar, then I could probably say that's nowhere on my radar and I'm not in dialogue with none of that. That's not even what I'm trying to do.
But you can't control that because
I can't.
the art goes out and then people just.
But
they
I think
scramble around
but
it.
there is
Yeah.
an attempt, however, I mean, again, trying to write, like knowing that there will be these readings because you know enough of the literature, or that you're signifying enough that folks who know that literature are like, that's what you're doing. Like I know, like that's not coincidental that you're doing that.
Right.
So it's not like a coincidental, like someone coincidentally arriving at this particular reading. Now, if somebody does end up at a certain spot, and then I'm like, yo, I don't know how you got there. Like, your GPS took you there, but that's like definitely not what I had programmed. Yeah. Then that happens, and I can be honest about that as well.
Right. Just nope.
But I don't want to take any of that away from folks. So I don't want to put like to try to apply some language to it and say this is the thing that was going on. If you don't read it this way, then you missed it.
Yeah, understood.
And that's why very often like with those like prefacing remarks, it's just like, okay, so here's some things that I knew I was trying to do.
Yeah.
And that's it. You look like you was about to say something true.
Yeah, I was just saying that if even after you explained the song, that's not what I knew when you sent me the verse. I just got the track and the verse, and I just got a feeling, and I'm like, okay, he escaping from something,
Yeah.
and he rhyming like this. It's dramatic, and let me hop on it and let me talk about my experience of escaping and what I'm interpreting from it. Then at the time, me and AD will have conversations, and maybe 2 years later, we'll be like, oh, that's what you was talking about. But it's really just a sense and the vibe that you get as a, at least from my standpoint, as a rapper and a producer. It sparks that initial energy, and then you go back later and you say, I was in this space at this point, and this is exactly what my goal was when I was writing this record. So.
Also, I had another friend who's an MC who works at another university who, we collaborated on something, and he's like, yeah, it's always interesting writing a song, like when we write a song, because I don't know what it's going to be until it's finished.
Right.
And like and then I'm like, well, this is like, for me, it's a learning process. Like, I don't know what we're doing until we're done. So I have these thoughts about what I want to accomplish, but this is like me inviting truth into a conversation with me about this thing. And then like his take on it is like me like sort of handing him the vehicle, and then he's driving. And so like I got like halfway to a spot and was like, here's the steering wheel. If you want to like get out and look at the car and see what it looks like, then you could talk about that if you like, or you could like take us to another destination.
That's cool.
Anything else would be whack to me. He was like, hey, I was writing exactly about this. Now I want you to be this character. Then I'm dead lyrically. I'm like, I don't want to be that character. I want to be truth in this position. I want to talk about this on this track. But of course, you don't want to talk about two different things. I didn't want to come in and talk about a totally different subject. You give the beat, you give it the title, and then you vibe out.
And that happened with Preem as well. To try to like Antidote was an entirely different thing when we sat down. We were in the room together. Like he came here last year to do a workshop with some of my students, and then we were like sitting there, like really. It's like, well, what's the story? Who are these people? And we didn't know what was going to happen to the people. We really didn't know what was going to happen to those two dudes who were in these two different spots. And I just knew we lived all over, but my pops, he lived on Wood Street. He lived on Wood Street. I always heard, I ain't no killer, but don't push me. Yeah. And that was like, so that was the thing. That was the thing that stuck. And then, and he like starts off his verse like grew up around the way, and then we go like to this point where like these two people meet, and it so happens that like it ends the way that it does. But that wasn't a thing that was predetermined.
Right.
We arrived kind of at that together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We have some questions from the audience. Take a couple minutes. Questions or comments?
You mentioned the word subversion, and that word kind of like impacted me and sort of kind of gave like a thematic coherence to everything. That there's this sort of subversion of like the rhyming couplets. There's this subversion of like idiomatic expressions where you're getting this like earworm and you're using it to communicate something completely different than you would expect. And especially in Kill Whitey, you have this subversion of this derogatory, offensive word that when people hear it, especially like a lot of white people, they'll like shut down and like, oh, like I don't want to listen to this. I don't want, you know, and it's sort of like you're missing the point that like there's so many other things to be like offended by. So it's sort of like using this kind of message, and yeah. So I thought that subversion was really thematically coherent across like lyrics, content, music, like all of it. So yeah.
I appreciate that. Also, it felt like it wasn't overkill to say like to literally say that in the song. It's like you're hearing something else when you listen to this, because it is like so potentially offensive that folks will just hear the thing that they're offended by and then go with that, even if you're telling them, but it's not that. I promise.
Yeah, so I want to pick up on this last conversation that you and Truth were having about the idea that there are these certain types of human actions that are, so it seems like free because we have no idea how they're gonna end before we start them. That's a really cool form of human beings that I think is really neat, is that we can do these sorts of things that just don't happen. You don't have a structure and come into being as you start to talk to each other. And what I'm wondering is like whether that's just like a thing that I'm super interested in. I wonder whether the fact that it was social matters there, or whether there's like when you're just writing tracks on your own, whether there's that same sort of lack of an endpoint.
For me, it's always it starts off as just a feeling in the title, but at the end, my goal is always to make sense of the end of the verse. I don't want to just put out something that doesn't have a middle and an end. So I feel like me personally, I feel like I told a beginning story, middle, and an end, and that it's not just ambiguous, and that it is an escape point from my standpoint. I feel like I captured it from that standpoint. I extract the same thing from AD's verse, but it does start off as just a feeling, and that's the funness of creating hip hop tracks, is that you can just start with a vibe, and then as you write it, it kind of increases as you write the verse, and then you go back and you start to read the beginning again and say, okay, let me make sure that this verse makes sense, and then sometimes it comes organically. You don't really have to work to do that. You're doing pretty good practice.
I think that sometimes things age differently. You know, like there's a thing that I intended and I wanted it to do a particular thing, and then time passes, and like the world has changed, but the piece hasn't. And so then the piece means something different because of how we get along with each other, since the piece came into existence. And I've had that happen. I remember writing a thing down in Clemson. It was a song called Willie Revisited, which is essentially about or at least a response to the so-called Willie Lynch letter. And at one point I thought this song is about the world of rap. It's about all of these rappers who are doing this terrible thing. And one day as I'm walking across campus, if you know Clemson, it's a plantation too. As I'm walking across that campus, I started feeling this song is about you. And I feel convicted by these words that I wrote, that I thought I was writing about other people as a critique of this thing. And it's dude, you are not outside the thing. Actually, you embody the thing. And then it just started being about me. And I'm yo, I came for myself. and I felt like really like done in by it and like sort of embarrassed, like that the song was like that. I thought
That's
like
sort of like what you were talking about.
so what?
I'm like, thank you very much.
Yeah. So yeah, that happens a lot when I think I'm doing this thing that I'm able to speak with some kind of like that I can speak from the outside of, and then I realize that like you keep thinking that there's an outside.
Listen.
Yeah, and I think to that point, I think it relates to something that you had mentioned earlier as well in the roundtable discussion about kind of being within and without some sort of larger body that we may not understand who's being harmed by the actions of liberation or what have you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think by virtue of being a student of yours as well, and just kind of listening to the work, the thing that resonates with me the most is that we are all agents of these institutions that we claim to be subverting, and simultaneously we embody what it is that the institution wants us to carry along, because the purpose of the institution is to, I guess, what is the word? Perpetuate. It's to stay alive. So as we are going through it, even as students at UVA, we're taught so many different things. Like this is how you can resist these norms and what have you. And yet a lot of us are punished for doing these things that are subversive actions. And it's kind of interesting to think about personally my role as a student and my role as an individual trying to resist the very thing that I'm being inculcated to
reproduce.
Yeah.
Who called it?
Yeah, well, it's real. I'm glad you were paying attention in class. I'm like, warms my heart.
I'm trying to figure out how I want to answer this question. It comes from a point you were making, and it had to do with understanding what the listener's expectations might be, and that you don't want to fulfill those expectations. That you know what they are. So there are these conventions, there are these sonic conventions that you don't want to satisfy. So again, without suggesting that you go to music or literature or any other art form as if it's like a medicine cabinet, what do you see yourself as re-educating the listener? Are you attempting in that process to make some comment on how people listen? That's the best way I can ask this question.
Yeah, I think that part of it is that like I realize how I've been like tricked into, like how I've been lured into listening more attentively, and then like it's like a tool. Like if I want to bring folks along, like there's a way that I think that there's a way that you can kind of like lay out the track, and then folks like like they see the tracks before them, and then like they can just close their eyes and they know they'll end up there, or they feel they'll end up there. Or I could like give them like that, and then there are these ways where like they're being pulled along, and like perhaps the track like gave them the false sense that that was where they were going.
So do you want to avert sleepwalking?
Well, no, and that's it. I think it's to like maybe because I'm also like never like I've never made the claim that I'm not myself the sleepwalker, and I think that there's ample evidence within that text that that the speaker like may also be asleep. So
there is no Archimedean point. There is no point outside of what you were making earlier.
Yeah.
There's no place you can stand that's free of all of these
Yeah. And so when I'm writing like those expectations that exist, it's like, to me, it's less interesting to fulfill them unless it is being fulfilled for a very specific point. And so like Kill Whitey, like I think is like the best example of that, is that it's fulfilling these expectations in sort of a way that that is, to me, kind of funny, but probably not as funny to anybody else. Because it's like, I mean, it's really to say like, I'm going to do it now. Like, but these are the terms on which I'm going to give you that fulfillment. So if you're going to sing a hook, I know there was a friend who's like, so you like, I don't know what to say to you because I want to play this song loudly in my car. But if I do, then I'll be playing this song loudly in my car. And then people are going to like wonder what's going on. And I'm like,
song loudly in my car.
yeah, and I'm like,
since I can get shot for so doing.
yes, and I'm like, but it thumps hard enough that like maybe people aren't listening. Maybe people aren't listening to the hook. They don't hear the words. If they do, then yeah, you got some explaining to do. But that's, you know, like between you and them, and not like necessarily my thing, which is also awful because like somebody could literally get shot for that. I mean, you know, like it stops being a joke when we bring Jordan Davis into the picture.
Right, exactly.
And think about like what the repercussions are for something like that. So it's like there's this like absurdity to it all that like gets really, really, really serious in the midst of our laughing.
Yeah.
So like to like sort of like be somewhere within that mess and know that like it seems like merely aesthetic until we start to give these concrete examples of where like those aesthetics like are a matter of life and death, you know, within your interaction in the world.
Yeah. One small thing, unless somebody else has to speak. Small. Well, we were supposed to go to 7:30, but we don't have to. You know, but I wanted to take up from Lanice. I think I'm remembering the question because I don't want to try to remember it because I want you to reproduce that.
Beautiful. Yeah, that was.
That
was 16 bars.
That point. I just want you to make that point again because it is itself so musical. Coming from Audre Lorde, the violence, not so much begetting violence. I don't.
Black women as collateral damage of the liberation quest,
And then AD's response was equally delicious. It was the thing in the antidote, the violence in the antidote, the poison in the antidote, which is kind of that's a form of definition of homeopathy, right? That's what happens in homeopathic medicine. Am I remembering this? Somebody help me. Don't leave me.
It sounds like to me Grimm's fairy tales, where the apple is the gift and the poison.
Yeah, but it was made from a
it's made from the
just building up a resilience to it. Without curing it, right? Certainly not restoring it. Certainly not getting your mind back. And has nothing to do with what it does to lots of folks who die with exposure.
To get to the antidote, the dosage, somebody has to test it, so people might actually die in the process of making it.
Yes, often do. Often black folks. Historically,
often
always.
Black women.
Often black women, to be specific.
And I was thinking of two things as you were speaking. You know, it's been going around the last month, this exchange from the 70s between Nikki Giovanni and Jane Buck.
Yes.
Right, where she's basically giving him a version of the same. But then I also thought, because as you're wearing Invisible Man and it's a book stack and all, and it's not an Invisible Man that Ellison is saying this, but it's in one of the essays in Shadow and Act, where he's really trying to explain corporal punishment and the resilience of corporal punishment in Black communities. In other words, why people beat their children, you know. And obviously, I mean, it's so theoretically sophisticated and intricate, but as near as I can tell, it's like I am beating you up to keep you from to keep you alive. You know, this is my version. Corporal punishment is a way. What's that?
It's great.
Yeah, but it's Allison.
Yeah.
It's Allison explaining this thing. You remember that woman in Baltimore after the
Yes.
And everybody is, you know, let's give this woman an Academy Award. She sees this child out here, she just goes upside his head.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I'm on my high horse. What? We cannot be condoning this, and you know. All the while unmindful of the fact that not only was I subjected to corporal punishment, but in the era where you were told to go outside and bring me a
Get a switch. You're a part of it. You bring it about yourself.
Yeah. And so it's this.
Wow.
Yeah, this violence to prevent violence, which is completely whack. But he's basically, and in his own articulation, he wants to see it as an expression of love, right? I gotta remember the essay.
I think it's the Richard Wright's Blues essay. I think it's the end of the
yes,
which
that
is
would have been it.
really
I was
amazing.
writing about Richard Wright, exactly. It is in Richard Wright's Blues.
Yeah.
All right, Jack.
About corporal punishment as homeopathy, and I don't know why I'm on this tangent, but
I mean, it's also though that you're saying beat you up to save you, and AD said, I don't want to be up. I want to be down. And so that's interesting to say, like, sure. And also, that's never the goal. Like, we don't want to survive oppression. Like, we don't want to survive violence. We want to not be violated. Period. So then how do we think about a strategy that has not to do with complicity or resilience to it, to fine-tune our ability to withstand? Like, how is it to not engage it, right? Even if it means killing Whitey and acting of violence harder on you so that I'm not, like, is that freedom? Can you even get free? We know you can't that way.
I wonder, so kind of what, you know, I was joking that that's my favorite song, right? Because it's a genuine banger, right?
Yeah.
Then every line undercuts what you think the previous line meant, right?
Yes.
Like, one of my favorite lines is the soundtrack, you know, to end white, the soundtrack to end white supremacy. And like, but if we actually do the thing that the words do, which is end white supremacy, don't we also, hopefully, ideally, right, then kind of dismantle the systems that kind of
We know better.
Right. But this is kind of, is that the way, right? That if the system is dismantled, right,
then you just take over the system and do the same thing again. If that was the way you want it, you go to war to take them over than to enact war. Right?
But,
like occupation and dominance is the language. So you can't get it. You get it how you live, right? And you will never live another way if you only got it that way. And so I think
violence is always generative.
Right. Which was my question about Audre Lorde and thinking about the interpersonal language that we get. Like, what do we really adopt that engenders a possibility of freedom? Often it is not, if that is the language, and if we take it up without scrutiny.
Well, this really, anybody else? Yeah, this is just, see, it's what, 80.